Rhythm games often fall into a very formulaic pigeonhole when it comes to gameplay, and while there have been many attempts to challenge the status quo, one of the most creative takes on the genre comes from Nintendo's beloved series, Rhythm Heaven. Made by Nintendo SPD, Rhythm Heaven follows the same zany style the development team had previously established with the WarioWare games. But once again, this story roots back to one musician with an idea. Mitsuo Terada, better known by his stage name Suku, is a very successful Japanese musician and has been for many years. Starting in the 90s, he was the lead singer for the rock band Sharam Q. I highly recommend you check out their music, it's awesome. He also later went on to form the popular idol group Morning Musume. However, in the early 2000s, Suku became to formulate an idea for a rhythm game, a detour from the rest of his professional career. He claims the idea started because he thought the timing of button presses in most rhythm games had little to do with the music. He wanted to make a game that would put more emphasis on auditory cues rather than visual cues to play in time with a song. He also wanted to make a game that, regardless of musical or gaming experience, anyone could enjoy and learn to improve the rhythm from. So, he made a game proposal and brought it to Nintendo on a complete whim, knowing that without them, his idea would never become a reality. And Nintendo was actually interested, especially considering they had toyed with the idea of making a rhythm game in the past. Kazuyoshi Osawa had previously made a tech demo in 2002 which allowed a player to play on a drum kit by hitting buttons corresponding to different drums. And so, directed by Osawa and produced/composed by Suku, the game's development started. Titled Rhythm 10 Goku, this was actually the last game made by Nintendo for the Game Boy Advance. By the time it had come out, the DS had been released for nearly 2 years. Osawa claims that this was because not only did he want people to play with buttons rather than a touchscreen, but he also liked the size of the Game Boy Advance's screen better. But by the end of development, Osawa was unsure if anyone would even like it. He worried that without some sort of score, no one would really understand the goal of the game. But thankfully, after releasing in Japan on August 3rd of 2006, the reception was immediately positive. The game also sold well, probably because they attempted to market it as though it was for the DS, since the system was technically backwards compatible with Game Boy Advance games. Pretty clever. The game itself is basically just a collection of small, self-contained mini-rhythm games, each with their own unique gameplay and songs. Most start out with a practice session that teaches you that specific game's controls and audio cues. However, some are so self-explanatory that they don't even need that. It then sends you straight into the action, playing through a tune that usually lasts about a minute or two, and finally you are presented with a quote on how well you did, followed by a performance rating. You are also shown these cute little epilogue screens that add an extra layer of charm to the game. It's also worth mentioning that after completing each rhythm game, your flow changes. However, it's unclear as to how this is calculated, and it's relatively arbitrary. If you're ever having difficulty beating a level, you can go to the barista and ask for words of advice, or if you've even failed 3 times in a row, he'll allow you to skip on to the next one. Everything is separated out into stages, each stage consisting of 5 rhythm games. Once those 5 are finished, you must complete that stage's remix level, which is a mashup of all the previous 5 games into one awesome level. And let's be honest, while the individual rhythm games are fun, far and away the best part of this game is the remixes. You just spent the past half an hour playing through these new and interesting rhythm games, and now you arrive at this grandiose mashup of it all? It's so cool. And it's even better at the end when the later remixes include random games from multiple stages. In total, there are 48 rhythm games, including 8 remixes. However, that's a bit overstated since the back half is filled with just harder versions of games you've already played. Most of the music in the game is not what you would call proper songs, but just rather small tunes that help support whatever rhythms that game is trying to teach you. However, some remixes do include real J-pop singles. Remix 4 is like this epic anime opening. Sometimes the game will prompt you to go for a perfect score on a random rhythm game, in which you will get 3 tries before the game stops offering this opportunity for a while. Achieving a perfect score unlocks a few things. You can listen to that rhythm game's song in the studio, it may unlock a new drum kit to play, and it also may unlock a new email to read, which are just cute little messages from the characters, once again adding a little extra flair to the game's overall vibe. All of this is a relatively lackluster bonus that wears off its charm after the first few times of frantically trying not to mess up during a song. My hands have never been sweatier. Aside from the core gameplay, there exists a little bit of side content, all of which is unlocked by earning medals from getting superb ratings on the main rhythm games. You can play with rhythm toys, which are cute little things to look at for a moment. You can play endless games, which are exactly what the name implies. However, half of these are already games you've played before, except now you can play them infinitely if you want. But both of those are relatively minor. The real secondary content is within the drum lessons, which are actually based on the original prototype Osawa had created years ago. They are both extensive and, in my opinion, quite the challenge. To be honest, I only got about 3/4 of the way through them. Once you feel like you've gotten the hang of the drum kit, you can go into the concert hall and play over some songs from the game. And while you still do get scored here, all you have to do to get a superb is just hit the drums on the beat, therefore making the crowd more excited by the end. The way in which you do so does not necessarily need to be intensely complex, which is nice since this feels like the only part of the game where you can freestyle and go outside the bounds of strict reactionary rhythms. This is a neat piece of endgame content that's definitely worth playing around with for a while. Not long after the success of Rhythm 10 Goku, Sega, of all companies, approached Nintendo with the opportunity to make an arcade version of the game. At first, Osawa thought this was a complete joke, but after meeting with them, he could tell that they were actually being genuine. Satoru Iwata gave the go-ahead, and after about a year, Sega delivered. The arcade version is nearly identical to the original game. You can select from any of the stages, including an extra 9th stage, which is actually just stage 1, but the music plays at 1.5 times the speed. They call this mode Tempo Up. But once you select a stage, you are locked in and must complete its 5 rhythm games before you can play the remix level at the end. However, getting an okay score is no longer enough. If you want to play more than 2 rhythm games, you need to consistently get superbs or even perfects. At the end of it all, if you did well enough, you can even input your high score into the machine. This is also the series' first time including multiplayer, although the number of songs you can select for 2-player mode is limited. Some games are split screen, some games include both players as characters, and some games alternate players. At the end of a multiplayer session, the game will also evaluate the pair's compatibility. Probably the biggest reason why I think it's worth playing this version is because it's on a proper arcade cabinet, and not a rinky-dink Game Boy Advance, so the arrangements are slightly fuller and the audio quality is reasonably better. Also, the buttons have tactile switches, which is very nice. And, as a super cool bonus along with this release, they made merch, including shirts and plushies, one of which is an onion from Rhythm Tweezers. It even has a hair you can pull on. Weird, but awesome. Unfortunately, because of the game's late release for a system that was already being phased out, Nintendo found little reason to translate and re-release it for other regions. This isn't too much of a problem though, considering that the Game Boy Advance is not region locked, and the game is relatively easy to play and navigate even without knowing Japanese. Plus, the original packaging is just so cool and worth owning in my book. It even comes with these cute little stickers. Neat! But, while playing the official release is fun for purists like me, the game does lose a little bit of that charm when you can't read the end results screen. Fear not, for as you can see here, there does exist a fan translation of the game, called Rhythm Heaven Silver. You can either play this as a ROM patch for emulation, or you can go online and get a real cartridge of the game modded with the patch. I would recommend the latter, since emulation leads to considerable lag that makes the game 10 times harder to play. I have noticed that the menus stutter on my copy, but this is nothing game-breaking, just worth mentioning. Now, in terms of playing the arcade machine, you may be in more luck than you think. While you probably could find a way to emulate this as well, it would defeat the purpose of playing on a proper cabinet. But, if you happen to live near a Round 1, like I don't, they may have a machine imported from Japan. Of course, there is no translation for this, as is typical for most of the imported titles Round 1 houses, but it's still incredible having the opportunity to play this extremely odd arcade game, giant D-pad and all. After the game's release, Nintendo obviously saw an opportunity to continue the series and this time release it worldwide. However, that required them to face the daunting question of how to make the game for the DS, a system largely defined by its touchscreen. The team could have stuck with the original formula and just used the buttons, but they wanted to try something new. With this new territory came lots of experimentation though. The team spent forever just trying to perfect the touch controls, often going back and forth between design decisions, even with Sunku. However, after months of tweaking and refining, the team finally came up with a good result that they all felt satisfied with. Regardless of the headache that it may have taken the team to make this sequel, the game released to great reception and good sales once again. Plus, this was the first time most people outside of Japan, myself included, had interacted with the series. They even got Beyonce to promote it in a commercial. Now that's impressive. In terms of the actual game itself, Rhythm Heaven is largely the same as its predecessor, except with new rhythm games and a few returning ones as well. But this time, each stage consists of only 4 levels followed by a remix. With 10 stages, the total number of rhythm games equals out to about the same as last time, but now with a higher ratio of remixes. Much appreciated. Also, instead of drum lessons, this game features guitar lessons, an equally interesting piece of side content. Personally, I think the idea of holding the DS sideways to play this game was a perfect choice. And while I know that the team was hesitant to implement touch controls at first, I think they work great. Tapping on a screen gets me way more into the rhythm of a song rather than pressing on small, mushy buttons. And while they could have stopped at just implementing taps, holds, and releases, they went even further and included flicking and sliding, both of which just feel extremely natural and, more importantly, fun. The whole control scheme just makes this game extremely unique, which makes it stand out against the other entries in the series. Again, the team looked forward, this time focusing their efforts on a release for a home console, the Wii. Thankfully, they decided against trying to shoehorn in any motion controls and just went back to using button presses as interactions with the music. Rhythm Heaven Fever follows the same formula the series has already established for itself by this point. 50 new rhythm games, including a few returning ones, 10 remix levels, and much of the same types of side content as before. They did also bring back 2-player mode with a few select levels, including some multiplayer endless games, some of which are completely new and unique. The only other thing worth mentioning is that apparently, if you get every single perfect in the game, it will unlock a super special endless remix, which includes 3 rhythm games that are completely unplayable otherwise. But let's be real, I don't have the patience for that. So I'm just gonna stick to watching other, more determined people play it on YouTube. Nintendo decided to once again make a new entry. Returning the series to the DS family, Rhythm Heaven Mega Mix is mostly a collection of some of the best rhythm games from the past 3 titles, including some new ones. It may seem hard to accept as a full sequel at first, considering it is largely a compilation of the series' previous success, but don't worry, this game brings more to the table than you think. First and foremost, unlike the first game on the DS, this one does not include sideways play. Also, it sticks to using buttons by default rather than the touchscreen. You can still use touch controls if you want by toggling it within the settings, but sliding and flicking are no longer a thing, meaning everything is now just a tap. And on top of that, many mini-games include multiple buttons as interactions, meaning that touch controls are technically easier and largely defeating the purpose. Regardless of all that, this sequel definitely does the most to try and break the mold the series has set for itself. It adds a proper story that pads the game's otherwise short playtime, something fans have become accustomed to by now. The structure of progressing between rhythm games is different, with remixes not being available until much later in the game. Honestly, a bit annoying. There are sometimes gates that you must pass through, which are basically just timing challenges in disguise. There are skill stars, which can be obtained by hitting the timing perfectly once somewhere within a song. The end result screen actually gives you a proper number rating, and the 3DS's bottom screen also acts as an accuracy meter, which is honestly a great addition. Multiplayer is actually still intact, this time in the form of local download play, where friends can play through challenges, or even duel it out in competitive figure fighters through Street Pass. The game has a few more pieces of unique side content, but nothing really worth mentioning. The only thing that I'll say that's truly disappointing about this game is that it didn't get a physical release in North America, and that is a huge bummer for people like me. I guess one day I'll import the European version just to own it, but still, it's not the same, especially considering that the 3DS is region locked. Well, where does that leave us now? The series has been a success for Nintendo, and it would be surprising if they didn't continue it onto the Switch. Sunku himself has tweeted that he's interested in making another game, but that tweet was later deleted for unknown reasons. There have been rumors and possible leaks of a new release being in development, but for now, that's all just speculation. Whether you call it Rhythm 10 Goku, Rhythm Heaven, Rhythm Paradise, or even Rhythm World, this series is just pure and honest fun, something that can be enjoyed by anyone of any age. And it's a series that no one seems to ever talk about, and I found that when I do bring it up, people have this sudden flashback of great memories. That isn't to say that people have been completely silent about their love for these games though. The biggest fan appreciation came in the form of a reanimated version of all the best remixes. Seriously, if you have not watched this yet, go and see it right now. It literally brings tears to my eyes with how happy and nostalgic it makes me. Real quick, while I was editing this video, the guys who did the first Rhythm Heaven animated did another one that you should also check out. There's also plenty of hardcore fans that make custom remixes. An interesting YouTube hole to go down for sure. There's even small little videos on the games that bring a smile to my face, like this one on how to properly play ringside. Or how about this video of the developers taking dance lessons because Sunku originally found it hard to express his vision to the team. Or how about this live performance of the song from the minigame Fan Club where the audience reacted exactly how you would in the game? I'm obviously hopeful that this series continues on into the future, but no matter what, Rhythm Heaven has been a super special series to not only me, but I'm sure to plenty of you as well. And for that, I'm thankful to Sunku, Osawa, Nintendo as a whole, and everyone else out there that's been involved in this game's creation and legacy. So what do you think of Rhythm Heaven? Is it the greatest game of all time, or is this the first you're even hearing about it? Either way, I'll be sure to catch you guys in the next video.